Hello, this is Bob Mangrum, and today's topic is your mind. Very often I have people ask me, how do I control my mind? What do I do to stop negative thinking? How do I stay more positive, and so on and so forth? And if you've heard my other recordings, I've illustrated several different ways around that, about maintaining positive thinking, about even working with your subconscious mind. But today I want to talk about something a little bit different, and that is the mind itself, in terms of where your mind is located. May seem like a strange statement, but what I mean by that is that whenever you have a thought, no matter what the thought is, that thought usually comes from some location in your mind. In a sense of our mind tends to think about our past or the future. Very often, if you were to monitor people's thoughts somehow throughout the day, imagine every time you had a thought, it had a printout. And you were able to have a readout, a printout of your mind or your thoughts throughout the day. At the end of the day, you'd notice that your mind is either, majority of the times, on the past or in the future. In other words, you're upset or angry about something that happened, or you are worried or fearful about something that's upcoming. So this idea that our mind seems to travel, if you will, travels into the past or into the future. However, there's another quadrant, if you will. Our mind can go into the past in terms of practical or fantasy, and our mind can go into the future in terms of practical or fantasy. So there are four basic elements where our mind can exist. So the first will be a past practical, a past fantasy, a future practical, and a future fantasy. And I'll go over what each one means. So past practical is basically, if you go back into the past, you're thinking about something you did maybe last week, or maybe you fixed something last year, so your mind has a memory or a knowledge of how to do that. So in other words, every time you make a cup of coffee in the morning, it's because you have that knowledge already from the past. Your brain or your mind goes back into the practical knowledge, the practical application of how to make a cup of coffee, or make a meal, or even drive your car. So this is fine. It's okay when our mind goes back into the past to gather resources, to gather information, to gather knowledge, in order to help us with something today. The second way our mind goes back is into the past and fantasy, meaning imagination. We go back into the past and we're only recollecting memories. We're only thinking about how somebody upset us. We're only thinking about how somebody made us angry. We're thinking about a past trauma or whatever. So it's not necessarily gathering information, it's simply reliving the past. And a lot of people tend to dwell on that one. And this is the source of a lot of stress, a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, a lot of hurt, and so on and so forth. People are not coming out of their past wounds because their mind is dwelling on past fantasy. The third is a future practical. So this is an example of maybe you're planning something. So let's say you're planning a party, or you have some appointments to make, and so on and so forth. For on the practical living, that's fine. You gather your knowledge, you gather your resources, you gather all that you need to do on a practical level to plan for or to prepare something in the future. And this type of thinking is not problematic. This type of thinking is practical, it's useful, it's beneficial. This is part of surviving or going through your day-to-day. Whether it's going to work, whether it's planning a project, whether it's planning a wedding, whether it's planning a birthday party, whether it's planning a vacation, and that's fine. The fourth is future fantasy. And this is usually the source of worry or anxiety. In other words, our mind is thinking about something that has not even happened. So even if we're going on a job interview, for example, we're thinking about we might not get the job. Am I going to do it correctly? Am I going to screw up? And so on and so forth. So we get anxious about it. Or we're about to do something and our confidence goes down because our mind is projecting into fantasy. Nothing is happening. You could be going on a date, for example. You're still at home. You're not even on a date yet. You're still at home getting ready, but you're all nervous. because your mind is slipping into the imagination mode. As someone once said, fear is simply the misuse of your imagination. Instead of imagining something positive and pleasant, we tend to imagine things that are negative and unpleasant. So we have this capacity to imagine, but we misuse it. We use it in a negative way, and this is the cause of our anxiety, stress, depression, and so on and so forth. So the past fantasy or the future fantasy are problematic. So when I say it's not so much what you're thinking, it's more so ask yourself, where are you thinking? Whenever you're feeling upset, angry, or whatever, ask yourself, where is my mind right now? Is my mind in practical or fantasy? Is my mind in the past or the future? So these are the 4 possible places that your mind can be located in terms of dwelling. And if you keep your mind on the practical level of things, on the past or the future, you will be okay. You will be able to move through your day-to-day in a more confident, skillful, pragmatic manner. Now there is one that I didn't mention, and that is the present moment. The present moment awareness, meaning that your mind is simply on the here and now. Your mind, for example, you're listening to this recording, your mind is just on this recording. Your mind is not distracted and dancing around, if you will, into the past or the future. When you practice to keep your attention on the present moment, and when you learn not to let your mind drift, something powerful starts to happen. You start to increase your consciousness. You start to increase your awareness. You start to remove depression, stress, anxieties. Those things tend to fall away naturally, because you are no longer giving your mind power to dwell on the past fantasies or the future fantasies. And by doing this, you're actually energizing your consciousness, your spiritual awakening, your potential, your confidence. Everything comes from this. So make it a regular practice. Whenever you're doing anything, let's say you're simply doing the dishes, pay attention to the dishes. In other words, feel the dishes. Feel the water, the temperature of the water. Become more aware of what's going on at the moment, and pay less attention to when your mind is going into the past or the future too much. So in other words, if you're doing the dishes and your mind starts to drift into the past and now you're getting upset, tell your mind, speak to your mind, say, come back to now. This is a very important exercise. This is a very important practice to develop over time, because something tremendous happens out of that. So no matter what you're doing, because you'll notice this. So for example, sometimes you could be watching television, but your mind's not on television. Your mind's not on a TV show. Your mind is on something else. Sometimes you're trying to read a book, and you're not really reading the book. These are common examples of where your mind is drifting. Sometimes you can be in a beautiful park, but your mind is worried about the future or dwelling on the past, and you're not able to enjoy the park. If you observe children, for example, they are always in the present moment. Their mind isn't thinking too much about next week or the week after. Their mind isn't even thinking about yesterday or last week. Little children are always in the present moment. That's why they're always in so much joy. That's why they're so pleasing to watch, because there's an excitement about them. And as adults, we have lost that excitement. That excitement has become dull or dimmed because of our mind has got too thick into dwelling into the past or the future. So begin from today to really notice not so much what you're thinking, but where you're thinking. And of course, what you're thinking will start to change, because as you begin to notice where your mind is, you will start to realize there's a lot of negativities there, especially, like I said, in the past fantasy or the future fantasy. So practice this, and again, keep your attention on the present moment as best as you can. Thank you.